explain to me why this is important legislation to pass? Why do we need it?
The U.S. and world economies have just gone through the worst financial collapse since the Great Depression. When Wall Street collapsed in 1929, Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal put into place mechanisms to establish an alert system and a safety net and a protection for consumers. Those protections were undone in the first 2 years of this decade by the financial reforms of the Bush administration. Without those protections in place, financial institutions that were not banks, that were not accountable to anybody, engaged in risky lending and leveraging that reached worldwide and caused this financial collapse. The legislation we're acting on today restores protective measures against such failures in the future.
But you know, the banking industry learned its lesson. Why do we have to actually pass this? I mean, what happens if we don't pass the bill?
If you don't have structural reforms, if you don't have institutions in place, if you don't have protective measures, if you don't have oversight entities, then you'll have this continued consolidation into massive financial institutions who then will turn to the government and say, look, you can't let us fail. You can't let us go down the drain, or banks in small towns will go down with us, and all of America will fail. I saw that happen with the New York financial crisis in 1976-77. I heard from small town banks in Minnesota that said, oh, you have to bail out New York City because if you don't, we'll go down with them. We have to prevent that from happening, and this legislation will put in place control mechanisms.
What does this mean for the future? What does it mean for an average person living in Minnesota?
I heard from the 7, 8 community banks across the Mesabi Range and in Duluth saying, we aren't part of this financial meltdown. We engaged in responsible, conservative mortgage lending practices. Our foreclosures are only in the normal range of 2 to 3 or 4%. But there are full pages of foreclosures from persons who engaged in risky lending practices with these online lenders like Ditech.com and others. We need to restore that balance. We need to protect the responsible actions of community banks and credit unions who act appropriately in the borrower's interest, and protect them and our communities from these huge international non-bank banks.
It's been said that a comparison's been made that what happened could be likened to running our financial markets like a casino. Do you agree with that characterization?
Those big financial institutions rolled the dice every day. They did it with computers who worked during the night while people slept. And when the morning rose, people found that their life savings were gone in an instant. We can't allow that to happen. Retirement accounts that unions have established, retirement accounts that companies like the iron ore mining industry have established were wiped out. Overnight, 50%, 60% of their savings were gone. We can't allow that to happen. We can't put people's life savings, life work at risk again. This legislation will put in place control mechanisms to slow that down, subject these practices to public review, and provide a means by which those practices can be stopped.